Well, it's hard to be excited about the fact that the Warriors escaped with a victory in Game 1, and it was all important. It was imperative that they got away with this win, steal this Game 1, and try to extend this Timberwolves series for as long as humanly possible, now that Steph Curry is out for the foreseeable future. We don't know how long. He has a hamstring injury. For the first time in his career, I think, because I've watched Steph Curry play since his rookie year, and I've seen him go through every kind of injury under the sun. And yet, one of the only injuries I've never really seen him deal with ever throughout the course of his career is a hamstring injury. And well, if you know anything about the game of basketball, one of the most trickiest injuries of all is the hamstring injury. Steph Curry can play through just about anything as long as he can walk. Ankle injury, knee injury, thumb injury, finger injuries, shoulder injury, spinal injuries. If he can walk, he will try to play through it. But a hamstring injury, well, you have problems walking when you have a hamstring injury. And as soon as I saw him grab the hammy in that second quarter, oh man, I immediately went into prayer mode and just prayed that it is the most minor of strains. Because a hamstring injury, man, that typically lasts anywhere from 2 to whatever amount of weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, depending on the severity of the strain. So obviously that just zaps all the energy and life out of you if you're a Warriors fan. And again, fingers crossed, prayers up. Steph Curry, may you heal as quickly as humanly possible. Having said that, the first topic of conversation here has to be Buddy Hield. Now, the vast majority of you guys know the deal with Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield, when he runs hot, ride him. When he runs cold, sit him. Because typically when he runs cold to start a game, he usually ends up sticking it up for the remainder of that game. And when he isn't hitting his shots, the rest of his game kind of go with him. But before I continue, if you like the content so far, be sure to hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and that like button so that this video gets out to all the basketball fans out there. Now let me think for a second. I don't know if Buddy Hield found a new sense of confidence. He just kind of evolved after that Game 7 performance where he just had the best game of his entire life. Because in this game, Buddy Hield started out 0 for 8 from the field. He couldn't hit the side of a barn. And to be honest with you, I wasn't even overly sweating this because we've seen it all season long. This guy runs hot and cold. And at the end of the day, the defense was holding up and then some. And when the defense is holding up, and for me always, when the defense is holding up, I am okay with whatever deficiencies you may get from the offensive end of the floor. But in the second half of the game, with Steph Curry out of the equation, the Warriors need offense. It needs to come from somebody. It just can't be Jimmy Butler by himself. He needs support. 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 And to start that second half, Buddy Hield came out on fire. He could not miss. And what was a mere 13-point lead at the half, despite the fact that the Warriors actually held the Timberwolves to 31 points in the first half. 31 points. When you hold a team to 31 points at the half, you should have a bigger lead than a 13-point lead. So it felt like a major missed opportunity for the Warriors. I'm pretty sure Anthony Edwards started the game 0 for 8 just like Buddy Hield did. And again, when you hold a team to 31 points and you hold Anthony Edwards to 0 for 8 shooting in the first half, yeah, the Warriors should have had something like a 20-point lead. But of course, they were missing Steph Curry after the first half of the second quarter. Moses Moody unfortunately couldn't hit the side of a barn in this game. And so you have to deal with that how you can. But yes, there was a stretch early in that third quarter where Buddy started to get it going. He hits his first 3 of the game early in that third quarter, and then he hits another 3, and then he gets a 3-point play after doing a little step back against Mike Conley. So that's 9 straight points for Buddy Hield to start that third quarter, and the Warriors have a 20-point lead. Really great stuff. And even in the fourth quarter, he hit some really big shots. And even though he shot 7 of 19 from the field, which is not good, ultimately he had 24 points. And 24 points on 19 shots is actually pretty good. And he led the Warriors in scoring in this game. Ultimately, 24 points. He even helped with the rebounding department, 8 rebounds in this game. You rarely see a role player play in the NBA for 10 years and essentially prove to be an unreliable player to consistently win games with throughout the course of your career, and then be as inconsistent as he was with the Warriors this season, and then come into the playoffs and essentially do the same thing. You're really good in some games and then you're terrible in other games. And it's almost like there's nothing in between when it comes to Buddy Hield. And for all we know, he may throw up 2 straight stinkers in the follow-up games. Unless he's actually and really leveled up because of these experiences that he's had, including, again, that Game 7. Whatever the inconsistencies and the frustrations we've had with Buddy Hield over the course of this season, and a lot of you guys probably know, there's this whole thing with Buddy Hield when it comes to his history. He has like this cycle thing where he has an amazing game, everybody loves him, and then suddenly he starts to stink it up, and now the fans all want him out of there, and then eventually he is out of there, he goes to the next team, starts out amazingly, the fans absolutely love him, and then he starts to stink it up, and then the fans start to hate him, and then he gets traded, and the cycle just repeats over and over and over again with this guy. But one thing we know for certain is that Steve Kerr is never going to give up on him because he's the one who recruited Buddy Hield in the offseason, and he's essentially shown that he's willing to die with Buddy Hield. And as long as that's going to be the case, you just hope that he continues to play more like the way he did in the last 2 games and continue to build up his confidence level. And honestly, without Steph Curry, for Buddy Hield to do what he did in the second half of this game, 22 points in the second half, that deserves a round of applause. And I'm not sending any apologies because what happened throughout the course of this season did happen. But if he continues to play well then worse throughout the remainder of the playoffs, then I just might have to fill out that apology form. I'm okay with that as long as he's helping the Warriors reach the promised land, because ultimately that's what I care about the most. I'm just trying to do everything I can to help the Warriors maximize what they have on their roster so that they can play the best brand of basketball and try to go all the way this season. And I try to do that every single season because Steph Curry is on this roster. And when you have Steph Curry on the roster, it is always possible to go win a title. But the surrounding conditions have to be right, and you have to do everything you can to try to maximize that. And how about Draymond Green? That second quarter, oh my gosh, I think he hit 4 threes in that quarter. As a matter of fact, I think that's the only time he hit his threes because he ended up shooting 4 of 10 from the 3-point line. But to start that second quarter, to watch him and Steph Curry go off and take complete control of the situation in that third quarter was really refreshing to watch before, of course, Steph Curry ended up hurting his hamstring. But to begin that second quarter, interestingly enough, Steve Kerr decided to put Steph Curry in the game to start that second quarter, which is unusual because Steph Curry, as you know, does not play those minutes where it's Jimmy Butler-centric minutes. And thinking about it now, I kind of wish that Steve didn't do that because ultimately that's where Steph Curry ended up getting hurt. Getting 1 day of rest after a grueling 7-game series against the Rockets, and maybe Steph Curry just didn't get enough rest before he got back into the game in that second quarter. I don't know, at the end of the day, that's a what-if situation. It just really stinks to have to know that the whole season is kind of in balance, not knowing what's to come with the Steph Curry situation. But I will say that lineup looked quite affordable. It was Steph Curry, Buddy Hield, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, and Quinton Post. And if you look at that stat sheet, it'll tell you that Quinton Post was a plus 14 in this game. And honestly, he didn't really do a whole lot. He just happened to be on the floor when Steph Curry and Draymond were going off to begin that second quarter. Again, they started off 12-0 in that second quarter to recapture the lead after getting out to an 18-20 deficit in that first quarter. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're just on the floor when Steph Curry has a Steph Curry flurry thing going on. But just to finish my point about Draymond once again, two-way play, 18 points in this game, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. And anytime you get two-way play from Draymond Green, that is huge for the Warriors. And it makes it really difficult to beat this team when Draymond also has it going. And it's always been that way. And Jimmy Butler in the second half of this game, there were times where it was frustrating because Jimmy Butler, it just seemed like he wasn't being aggressive enough. And he's kind of overly playing within the system where he's constantly passing the ball out. But sometimes as a star player, especially with Steph Curry out of the equation, Jimmy Butler has to be in takeover mind. But at the end of the day, without Jimmy Butler, would the Warriors have won this game? Would they have survived that barrage in that fourth quarter when the Timberwolves made their run? I don't think so. At the end of the day, Jimmy Butler, 20 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals, just 1 turnover. A poor shooting performance, yes. Not going at Dante DiVincenzo enough when he was essentially taunting him to do so. Probably not the best. But that's the thing about the game of basketball. The game of basketball entails more than just scoring the ball. There's so many other aspects that you gotta hold together from the standpoint of connecting on both ends of the floor. And Jimmy Butler is the ultimate connective superstar. One of the greater connective star players that we have seen in the Steph Curry era. And I continue to be grateful that he's on this roster. And now that Steph Curry is going to be out for the foreseeable future, they're going to have to really rely on Jimmy Butler to carry them through this series and find a way to continue to extend the series for as long as Steph Curry's out. To be honest with you, I want this series to last as long as possible because that's going to give Steph Curry enough time to hopefully be available towards the end of it going into the next round. Because after seeing some of the flaws of the Timberwolves, it's hard to see the Warriors losing to this team. Yeah, the Timberwolves had some time off and they clearly came in not ready. Anthony Edwards totally inconsistent. Mike Conley was a no-show. And I'm not overly worried about Julius Randle hurting the Warriors. Having said that, the Warriors threw a lot of zones at the Timberwolves and they just weren't ready for it. At some point, I think they were shooting like 2 of 22 from the three-point line. Insane. Ultimately, they ended up shooting 5 of 29 from the three-point line. If they shot a little bit better, this might have been a different game. And I do expect them to make adjustments after this one and be able to perform much better. So the Warriors have to be prepared for that. And that fourth quarter, man, Jonathan Kuminga is back in the equation, and I just don't understand why. Okay, let's just say for the sake of argument, okay, you're missing Steph Curry now. You have to get more points from somewhere, and Kuminga is a scorer. So let's get him into the game and try to get him to score a bunch of points. But the problem with that is, well, you're inserting him into the game with Jimmy Butler on the floor at the same time, and that will take away from Jimmy Butler. And Kuminga is just an amateurish player. It's just too much of a gamble to play a young guy who doesn't play with his heart on the defensive end of the floor, and then offensively, he just doesn't read the floor consistently enough. You know, I remember one particular play where in that second quarter where Dante DiVincenzo is driving into the lane and Kuminga is right there. And instead of just guarding up because he's much bigger than Dante DiVincenzo, he has the wingspan and the length and the athleticism to properly contest the Dante DiVincenzo layup attempt. But he chooses to stand like a cone. Dante avoids him. And then he just kind of throws up a little flip shot and Kuminga is just standing there and watching him. Where is the contest? I just don't understand why when he's given these opportunities, he can't just think to play his heart out. The effort just isn't there enough. And then there's another play where he's in the post. GP2 is cutting down. If Kuminga makes the pass to GP2, GP2 has a 2-on-1 situation at the rim with Jimmy Butler standing at the dunker spot. But no, Kuminga just lets him cut through and then throws up a whack lefty hook shot, whatever thing that he did. It was a wild miss. And these are the disconnected stuff that you just cannot have in the playoffs. And then ultimately Steve elected to try that lineup once again, that 3-forward combination of Jonathan Kuminga, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green. That unit in the regular season was a -25. And to start that fourth quarter, that's the lineup that Steve threw out there. And the first thing that happens is Kuminga turns the ball over to Mike Conley. And then the Timberwolves get out in transition and Anthony Edwards gets an and one. And the last thing the Warriors need to be doing is turning the ball over and giving Anthony Edwards easy buckets to get him into rhythm. Yeah, in a game where a chunk of the Warriors players in rotation were a positive, Jonathan Kuminga ended up being a -9. He did manage to hit a big corner 3 in that fourth quarter, but whatever points he's providing is no good if the Warriors are just giving it right back whenever he's on the floor. And that tends to happen more oftentimes than not. So you keep trying Kuminga here and there, and he's just not good enough. And he said in an interview not long ago that he really doesn't like it when people keep asking him if he's ready. If he's ready, he has to be ready. He has to stay ready whenever that opportunity comes. And he's like, I'm always ready, blah, blah, blah. But whenever they put him out on the floor, he never seems ready. And you know, in that fourth quarter, the Warriors got into real trouble. We've seen it over and over and over again. Steve Kerr has trouble holding on to big leads. And the Warriors went into the fourth quarter with a 20-point lead. But the Timberwolves are going off. The 3-forward lineup does not work. Steve Kerr turns to the tiny lineup, and the tiny lineup worked well enough for the first 3 quarters. But to close the game, the Warriors need to go bigger and rely more on bigger defenders. You need an anchor out there, and when you have a tiny lineup and Draymond is trying to box out Rudy Gobert and try to play help defense at the same time, it's just not going to work. And next thing you know, the Timberwolves go on a run, and now suddenly that 20-point lead has evaporated into a 10-point lead, with half of the fourth quarter still left to play. So now the Warriors are in big trouble. Draymond picks up 2 quick fouls, and suddenly he has 5 fouls, leaving Steve Kerr with no choice but to rely on Kevon Looney, who comes into the game and completely restores order. He gets multiple stops at the rim. He stops Anthony Edwards at the rim, something that Draymond could not do for a chunk of the early part of that fourth quarter. He stops Jaden McDaniels' drive to the rim. And then the Warriors are on the offensive end, and Buddy Hield once again hits a big shot to restore order, give the Warriors back some confidence with a 13-point lead. And the Timberwolves, despite the fact that they were on a huge run, failed to score for practically the next 4 minutes. With Kevon Looney on the floor, it forces the Timberwolves to switch up their strategy, take Rudy Gobert out of the equation, because with Looney on the floor, Rudy Gobert's effectiveness is neutralized. If you remember in the early part of that fourth quarter, Rudy Gobert is suddenly looking like Shaquille O'Neal. He has like a one-on-one opportunity in the paint against Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler is simply too small, and Rudy Gobert just drops his shoulder down a little bit, gets closer to the paint, and then he just dunks it down. And those are the kinds of things that can happen when you're too small, and those are the kinds of things that can never happen in the fourth quarter when you're trying to close a game. And when it was just Jimmy Butler and Draymond in the paint trying to defend the paint by themselves, man, Jimmy Butler was getting schooled. Anybody and everybody was going into that paint area, and Jimmy is not like some shot blocker who's going to deter shots at the paint. So of course that makes him look worse than he actually is. But at the end of the day, Steve just needs to mix it up a little bit better and understand in the fourth quarter, when you have like a 15-point lead, it is imperative that you put out enough defense and enough size with it to protect that lead. And that lead was utterly protected when Kevon Looney came into the game and anchored the defense. Big shout out to Kevon Looney. If you look at the box score, you will never understand the level of impact that Kevon Looney had in this game to prevent the Timberwolves from stealing this game, because it could have easily happened. Have you seen the second round of the playoffs, guys? Everybody is stealing games left and right. Just before the Warriors game, that Cavaliers game was absolutely mind-boggling, insane. They gave up a huge lead, and somehow Tyrese Halliburton ends up hitting a 3-point shot, erasing a 7-point lead with 1 minute left in the blink of an eye, man. So at the end of the day, in this one, I'm going to give Steve Kerr some credit for being able to hold this lead and making just enough adjustments with that Kevon Looney move. Like, he could have for no reason at all brought in Quinton Post for all we know, and the game would have completely gotten out of hand. But maybe, just maybe, he finally learned the lesson that Kevon Looney is way more viable for this team in the playoffs at the anchor spot than rookie center, no defense Quinton Post. Yeah, that's the lesson that he learned in that game 7, and he carried it over into this game. I feel like I'm babysitting here a little bit. You should obviously know that Kevon Looney is more of a viable anchor for this team than Quinton Post. But at the end of the day, that's the move that Steve Kerr made, and that is what ensured that they would be able to come away with an all-important victory in Game 1. I'd like to give a quick shout out to GP2. He almost missed the game due to some of the residuals of the illness that he had from the previous game. And apparently he's also dealing with some elbow inflammation. But overall, he was really good in this game, and he hit a clutch 3-point shot in the corner in that fourth quarter with about like 2-3 minutes left or so. Gigantic shot. The Timberwolves made an adjustment, took Gobert out of the game because he was being neutralized by Kevon Looney. That's when Draymond Green came back into the picture, because, you know, you got Naz Reid in the corner, and now you don't have to worry as much about the Timberwolves grabbing offensive rebound when their big guy is out in the perimeter. Major shout out to Pat Spencer as well. He got some minutes in this game, and he did some really good things. He's a really good basketball player, a tough basketball player. They call it phantom foul when he knocked the rebound away from Gobert. He hit that tough hook shot over Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. He's a really unique player, really aggressive offensive player, and he provided some very valuable point guard minutes with Steph Curry out of the equation. To be honest with you, I think he's a much more reliable player to be in rotation over Jonathan Kuminga, if we're talking about needing more scoring from another player, while not completely compromising your defense. Steve Kerr typically likes to play Guy Santos with Steph Curry, but with Steph Curry out of the equation, he stopped going to Guy Santos altogether. And in that first half, he played Quinton Post and Moses Moody, but in the second half, he took those guys completely out of the rotation. And that was mostly a good adjustment, but I really would have preferred to see Guy Santos in there over Jonathan Kuminga at the end of the day. And now that Steph Curry will be out for I don't know how long, I actually think that it's imperative the Warriors go to more traditional lineups. It makes more sense to go to these small, tiny lineups. Even though I hate it, it at least makes sense to some extent in terms of Steph Curry generating the offense. Without Steph Curry generating the offense, why are you going tiny all day? You've got to go more traditional. I do think that Trayce Jackson-Davis makes way more sense for this series than Quinton Post. Remember, the Warriors went 3-1 against the Timberwolves in the regular season. Remember, Trayce started the final 2 games against the Timberwolves and they won both of those games. He's an impactful player against a guy like Rudy Gobert. And he matches up much better in general against some of their bigs like Julius Randle. Yeah, I think they're going to have to rely on more defensive-leaning lineups that involve more bigs with Steph Curry out of the equation. But that's a story for another day. There's a long series ahead. We'll see how it goes. They're going to have to play through Jimmy Butler a whole lot. Potts is going to have to play much better than he did tonight. But again, major shout out to Buddy Hield, Kevon Looney, Jimmy Butler, Draymond, GP2 as well. These guys showed a lot of heart being able to overcome the loss of Steph Curry in this game. Thank you so much for watching. Plenty more to come. Until next time.